Friend. Narrated by Edward Kitchen. Copyright Edo Projects 2020.
Let me explain. You see, inside each of us, there is another. I'm going to call it friend. It's always speaking, but we rarely listen. I started listening to my friend a few years ago. Firstly, just out of curiosity. Then, once I had acknowledged its existence, because it wouldn't stop talking. Well, it can't exactly talk. It's more like whispers that only I hear. Even I can't hear these whispers that clearly. It's like they come to me second-hand, like thoughts reflected through a mirror. The whispers don't come in sentences or words. They're more like images. Friend echoes so quietly inside my skull that sometimes I wonder if it is really him or just my own reflected thoughts. I suppose the reason he shows images instead of words is that he's from rather a long time ago. You see, where friend is from, or when friend is from, only thought and action existed. He has plenty of his own ideas, of course, but they're never presented as a whole. Making them out is like fitting together pieces of a puzzle. What he says is neither here nor there, but somewhere in between. For us to have any hope of comprehending our friend, you almost have to feel as much as listen. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining it very well. If I was to try and tell you exactly what friend is, I would have to say that friend is me, and you. Friend is all of us before we became what we are now. Or at least before we were smart enough to convince ourselves that we were something else. There's an instinctual part in us that knows friend is dangerous, possibly fatally so. It's something we left behind and decided to rise above, before we lay on the trappings of society. But all we've really done is cover friend up with some rather thin sheets. He's still there, and will be for a very long time, I suspect. Is friend an enemy? I suppose that depends on your point of view. He's certainly not going to play by your rules. That's because time is different for friend. He moves at a different speed. I suppose you could say that the real secret and the longevity of our friend is that it is the infinite in our finite minds. That's precisely why it's so dangerous to listen to him. He knows things that are no longer taught. Guides us in ways we don't even realize. Take my case, for example. I suppose my own mind decided to try and stop listening to friend when it realized how influential he was, and staged a sort of rebellion or coup. You see, I wanted to feel like I had a choice, that my strings weren't being pulled by some ancient puppet master. So I decided to stop paying attention to friend altogether. And that's when the headaches began. Snaking along the edges of my skull, they would twist inwards and pound rhythmically against my temples. Friend was punishing my rebellion through our shared biology, hammering on the door and demanding to be let back in. I had unwittingly entered into a war of the mind. But what was it all for? Had I subconsciously decided that friend wasn't to be trusted? How did I know he didn't have both of our best interests to mind? Perhaps he could help me in this world. He was, after all, clearly some product of the evolutionary struggle. I reasoned that it would be in friend's interest as much as mine to keep our bodies safe and sound. I realized that friend wasn't trying to push me out completely. He wasn't trying to kill me or make me brain dead or take over. He wanted to make sure there was a balance, that he wasn't being pushed out completely, and that we didn't forget where we came from. And so the war continued. Friend put up a valiant fight, constantly screaming and hammering away in my dreams, sometimes even reaching up at unexpected times to interrupt my waking hours with visions of the savannah. I thought I could do with some fresh armaments to help me fight my war. Sleeping pills helped squash Friend down, deep into the well of my past. At this point, if he was still talking, I no longer heard him. But Friend is a sly old dog. He's had many more years of experience in these things than I have, and this is his home too, after all, and he fought to protect it with all the veracity you'd expect. Well, you see, I'm making an awful lot of assumptions here. I'm assuming in the first place that Friend is conscious enough to make these choices himself. Perhaps he's doing it out of his own natural instinct. Perhaps he's on autopilot. Or perhaps Friend has a friend himself that whispers to him in turn. Perhaps he is engaged in a war on two fronts, and stands as the bulwark between me and something even more dark and primitive. I asked myself then if it would be wise to squeeze him out completely. What would I unleash if I did? Or, thinking more positively, I imagined that there was nothing else down there, and once I'd vanquished Friend, what I thought of as being my own consciousness would sweep down and fill the vacant space, and my victory would be complete. I could even be the first human being to utilize all of my brain power. I could become a true master of my own consciousness, using reason and logic. But herein lies the paradox. For you see, the closer I dug into my unconscious mind, the closer I became to Friend and possibly his friend, the more I sought to light up all the dark corners of my mind, the less and less I felt like I was in any kind of control at all. You see, I'm not trying to make excuses, but as I dipped back into the ancient chambers of my brain, a vast chasm opened up below. I fell into it and became directionless. And where was Friend? Well, you might think after how I treated him that he would have abandoned me, but no, he was right there to help pick me back up. He gave me somewhere to land, and when I did, he steered the ship for me, and showed me that we did have somewhere to go, after all. Of course, relatively speaking, I was quite naive at that point still, and what I thought was a helping hand was actually a hostile takeover. It wasn't what I wanted at all, but the alternative seemed to be plunging into a spiral of unending madness. It actually felt rather good to be swept up in the free spirit of long-dead men. In the mind that Friend showed me, I was running across the plains again, a taste of meat still warm in my mouth. I smeared sacrificial blood on the walls of caves, painting our history. Friend showed me things about myself, through myself. Things forgotten to me, forgotten to all of us now. Things civilized people have no business seeing. With him in charge, I didn't just glimpse savagery. I swam in it. And if I seem only mildly repentant, it's because I don't feel like I was in control for any of it. By the time Friend had finished his lesson of the past, and I was able to take control once more, it was too late. I looked back at the life I had like a distant memory, disappearing into the mists of time. As you are all aware, I've done things that are, in the eyes of our society and our time, monstrous, but to Friend, they were perfectly rational, necessary even. But perhaps all this is my fault. I had reached down too far into the depths of the past, and burned my mind to cinders on the primordial flames of our ancestors. So you see, Your Honour, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm not at all saying I'm innocent of these crimes, but I hope you'll also see that I can't entirely be guilty, can I?
This has been a reading of Friend, brought to you by Edo Projects.